Good evening, my little creatures of the night. Mr. Wendigo back again with your late night creature feature. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from tonight? Alone in your room? Driving through empty roads? Drop a comment and let me know. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now then, let's see what tonight's tale brings us. The Feeding Room. Chapter 1. The Whisper. The motel room smelled like bleach and old carpet, and the Coke machine outside thumped every 10 minutes whether anybody wanted a Coke or not. Kendra Lockhart lay on the bedspread staring at the ceiling. She hadn't slept right in 3 weeks, not since Harlan. The claw marks on her shoulder had scabbed over and started to itch, which meant they were healing. The bruises on her throat had gone from purple to yellow-green. She flexed her hand and felt the sigil scar pull across her palm, still pink, still tight. She looked like she'd lost a fight with a lawnmower, which wasn't far off if you swapped the lawnmower for a dead man with claws. Her ankle felt normal. She kept reaching down and checking it, the way you keep touching the spot where a ring used to be. 27 years of cold and now nothing. The root things were gone. The door was shut, but the dead still talked. And they always had. The door hadn't given her that. She'd been born hearing them, same as her brown eyes, same as the stubbornness her mother called a curse and her father called survival. The dead in this part of Texas were quieter than the ones back home. They whispered directions mostly, east and down, patient about it, like giving someone directions to a gas station. The voices of people who'd been killed wrong and needed somebody to hear them. Kendra listened. That was the job now. It didn't pay. It didn't come with dental. But the hours were terrible and the clients were dead, so at least nobody complained about turnaround time. Luna Valentine lay at the foot of the bed with her head on her paws, pale blue eyes half open, ears twitching at sounds Kendra couldn't hear yet. The cut across her ribs had healed fast, the way Luna's wounds always did. Whatever ran through that dog's blood, it kept its secrets. You hear them too. Luna's tail thumped once against the mattress. The Abilene job from 3 weeks ago had led her south. Reports of missing persons, things seen walking around after they'd been declared dead. She'd found 2 of them in a drainage ditch just outside Waco, drained clean, no visible marks except needle punctures in the crook of each arm. Whatever did this was professional, organized. Not some lone feeder tearing into cattle behind a random trailer. This was definitely something with a system. Deputy Harlan would have known what to do with that kind of information. He'd have made his calls, pulled records, found the thread that connected the dots she was staring at. But Harlan was dead, hung from a windmill with his badge nailed through his chest, and the 37 missed calls from his wife were still sitting on a phone Kendra had wiped and dropped in a mailbox outside Abilene because she didn't know what to say to a woman whose husband died helping her. She was on her own, no handler, no tips, just a dog with pale blue eyes and a bag full of things that killed what shouldn't be walking around. She swung her legs off the bed and pulled on her boots. The duffel sat on the dresser where she'd left it. She unzipped it and laid everything out on the bed the way she always did before a job, the Bowie knife with the sigils carved into the blade, the Mossberg with the shortened barrel and the custom shells, UV and silver and salt, stakes, ash wood with steel caps, UV flare she'd built in a garage with spare parts and bad intentions, the silver-edged machete that Luna always perked up at because the dog liked the sound it made coming out of the wrap. "Don't get excited yet," Kendra told her. "We don't even know what we're walking into." Luna's tail thumped again. She knew exactly what they were walking into. She always did. The TV was on mute, strobing the room with pale light. Local news showing a county map with red dots clustered south of Dallas. The caption said animal attacks, which was what it always said when nobody wanted to explain why the throats were torn out and the blood was missing. Kendra watched for a minute, filling in what the anchor wasn't saying. Livestock drained, bar fights with no bodies recovered, drag marks across gravel leading to doors that stayed shut. She packed the duffel, slung the shotgun, and hooked the knife to her belt. The machete went in the back scabbard where she could grab it over her shoulder in one motion. She checked herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked tired. She looked like she'd been doing this too long. She looked like she was going to do it anyway. "East," the dead whispered. Not loud. Just there, the way background noise is there. East and down. "Yeah." Kendra grabbed her keys. "I heard you the first time." She opened the door. The night leaned in, warm and heavy, smelling like diesel and old fry oil. The Dodge Durango sat in the lot under a neon sign that was missing enough letters to read "WeCome" instead of "Welcome." Luna hopped into the passenger seat, circled once, and settled with her head on the armrest. Kendra started the engine and pointed them east. Chapter 2. Lockhart. The town showed up on a dented green sign that said Lockhart 5, and by the time Kendra got there, she understood why the number felt like a warning instead of a distance. The highway had gone quiet. Nothing but mesquite and utility poles and pasture fences stapled to the earth with rusty T-posts. Lockhart was 4 blocks, maybe 5 if you counted the dead laundromat with a new owner's soon banner that looked like it had been hanging since the Clinton administration. The feed store was dark. The barber pole was frozen with a crust of dust on the glass. There was a diner with a hand-lettered sign in the window that said "Cash only, no exceptions, be nice." She parked at the curb. A teenager in a hoodie and shorts skated past on the sidewalk and didn't look at her, which told her something was wrong right there. In healthy towns, people looked at strangers, even if it was just to judge. Inside, the diner had 4 booths and a counter and a light situation that made everybody look like they were waiting for bad news. A waitress with smoker's hair gave her the once-over before she'd made it 3 steps. A cowboy hat sat alone at the far end of the counter, brim down, crown scuffed with sweat salt. He kept his eyes on the wood. "What can I do you for?" the waitress said. Her name tag read Daphne and her fingernails were the color of a bruise still healing. "Coffee." She dropped onto a stool. "And directions." "Directions are free." Daphne grabbed a mug, skipped checking if it was clean, and filled it from a pot that had been dying slow on the hot plate since at least that morning. "Where you headed?" "Bar on the highway." She tipped her head east. "Red sign." Daphne looked at her a beat too long. "You don't want the red bar." "That what they call it? Real creative." "New owner painted it that way." She set the mug down. "Used to be Billy's. Billy got religion and sold the place to some boys out of Palestine, or that's what they said. Changed the name from Billy's to 45, then painted the whole thing red and broke half the sign bulbs. Now it just says bar." She paused. "A lot of folks around here changed their hours after that." "Because of what?" Daphne leaned on the counter like she was holding the whole building down. "Because life's long, honey, and sometimes the nights are longer." The cowboy hat chuckled. It was a dry sound, like boots on dead leaves. "You ain't from here." The words came from under the brim. "Nope." "You with the sheriff?" "Nope." "Then you don't need the red bar. They don't card the dead." "Hush, Earl." Daphne cut him a look, then turned back to Kendra. "Sheriff will tell you to stay clear. He'll say it's teenagers riling themselves up, telling stories about bites and missing folks and coyotes big as calves. He'll say Billy's was rough back when it was still Billy's, so what's new?" "What do you say?" Kendra asked. Daphne checked the booths. A family of 3 cutting pancakes at one, 2 road workers staring at their plates like they were reading fortunes at the other. Then she dropped her voice. "I say, since that place opened, the cemetery ain't been quiet. I say we don't get proper sunrises anymore because the birds have left. And I say my son's friend Damien took a job there washing dishes for cash. And he hasn't called his mama in 3 weeks." She glanced at the worn patch on Kendra's jeans where the thigh holster printed when she breathed. "And I say if you're the kind of woman who walks in here with that look, then you already know what I'm about to tell you." "I do." "Coffee's on me." Daphne slipped a couple of ones from her apron to the register when she thought Kendra wasn't watching. If you could just leave it better than you found it. That's the plan. Good girl. Earl tapped the counter with his knuckle. Make a mess for once. They're too clean out there. Kendra finished the coffee in 3 swallows and left a 10 tucked under the sugar jar. Daphne pretended she didn't see it, because sometimes the fiction of a gift is the kindest thing 2 strangers can do for each other. Outside, the stoplight flipped from red to green for nobody. A box of kittens sat under the grocery store window with "free" written on the cardboard in marker. One of them, a little muted calico, made eye contact with Luna through the truck glass and puffed up with a hiss that was more ambition than threat. Luna's ears went up, her tail thumped once. She had opinions about cats, but she kept them professional. They rolled east, past the grain elevator, past the parts yard where chrome hubcaps hung on a chain-link fence, past a trailer with a backyard altar, a Virgin Mary in a blue bathtub shrine with Christmas lights still up in October. Kendra made a note of that one. Somebody in this town understood that talismans weren't just decoration. The red bar sat on the shoulder of Highway 45 like a nail the road had hammered in and forgotten about. The sign was a rectangle of red tin with a dozen bulbs, half of them dead, so the only word that still lit up was bar. The parking lot was oil stains and broken glass and a few things near the dumpster that she didn't want to look at too closely. 3 motorcycles sat out front, black on black with handlebars high enough to crucify somebody on. A pickup so lifted it looked embarrassed sat beside them. Luna's hum started the second Kendra killed the engine. Not a growl yet, just a note, low and steady, the way a guitar string sounds when it's almost in tune but not quite. Kendra put her hand on the dog's chest and felt it buzz. Luna's lip lifted just enough to show 1 white canine. 2 minutes. She scratched behind Luna's ears. If I'm not back out, make noise. Luna nosed her hand. Not a question, an answer. Chapter 3. The Red Bar. Kendra left the shotgun in the truck. Long guns turned conversations into raids, and she needed to see the room before she started rearranging it. The machete went up in the back scabbard until the grip sat against the base of her neck. 2 stakes went behind her back under the belt. 1 UV flare, not yet cracked, went in her jacket pocket. A fight in a bar was always closer than you planned for. The door was heavier than it looked. That meant there was insulation in it, and insulation meant somebody wanted to keep sound in or light out or both. It opened on a push of cold air that smelled like a walk-in freezer mixed with something sweet and something old. Music came with it, some country song about trucks and Jesus that could have been about anything. Inside, the light was red, not from red bulbs. Somebody had hung sheets of translucent material in front of the fluorescents, like butcher paper dyed with food coloring. It made everyone's skin look alive in a way that was probably a lie. The floor was poured concrete with a slight slope toward a drain near the back, barely noticeable, maybe half an inch across the whole room. But Kendra noticed, because noticing things like that was the reason she was still breathing. The bar top was old oak, scarred with cigarette burns and ring stains. Behind it, a row of bottles with the labels turned away. 3 men sat at a corner table in black denim vests with no patches, which was how you knew the patches weren't the important part. A woman sat at the bar with dark hair and a laugh that sounded like someone shaking bolts in a coffee can. The bartender had a towel over his shoulder and a wet rag in his hand and a smile that had been rehearsed in a mirror. His eyes didn't match the performance. They were flat and still, like pennies at the bottom of a jar. "What's your poison?" he said. "Information. Don't serve that past midnight." "It's 11:40. She checked the clock on the wall, which was made of antlers. Something dark had been dabbed into the grooves of the bone. You wouldn't notice unless you were the kind of person who noticed. Kendra was that kind of person. Time moves different in here. The bartender smiled wider. Then coffee. She leaned on the bar. Black. The dark-haired woman snorted. "Nobody drinks coffee in here." "I do." She put money on the bar. The bartender poured it from a carafe that had seen better years and set it down with a glass of water she hadn't asked for. Kendra left both alone. Every glass in a place like this was a question you were better off not answering. "Just passing through?" the bartender asked. "Looking for somebody. Kid named Damien. Skinny, acne scars. His mother says he started washing dishes here 3 weeks ago and hasn't called since." The bartender wiped the bar in a circle that was already clean. "Doesn't ring a bell." "His mother's bell rings just fine." Kendra held his eyes. "She's worried." "That woman at the diner runs her mouth all day," he said, with the tone of a joke that wanted to be a threat when it grew up. "Can't trust a bell like that." The dark-haired woman tapped a fingernail on the oak. It was more of a talon than a nail. "What's it to you?" "I like it when sons call their mothers. Makes me feel like the world's less likely to cave in." "World already caved," the woman said. "We just live in the hole. Drink your coffee." Kendra left the coffee where it sat. She stood there and let the room breathe. There was a doorway at the back with plastic strip curtains, the kind you see in meat lockers, the ones that slap your shoulders when you walk through like they're trying to count you. Condensation beaded in lines down the strips. She caught a flash behind them, pale tile, stainless steel, a glimpse of chain. The 3 men at the corner table had stopped, pretending they weren't watching her. The youngest one, the one with the nicest face and the worst smile, lifted his glass in her direction. The liquid in it was too thick to be whiskey, too slow on the glass. He licked one of his canines the way a nervous man licks his lips, except there was nothing nervous about him. "I heard you asking about a boy." He swirled his glass. "Skinny kid. Cute." Cute's not the word his mother used. Mothers don't know the half of it. The other two laughed into their drinks. The bartender wiped the bar again. "You don't want to be here, sweetheart. Road's safer. That dog in your truck is going to miss you." "I'll leave when I'm ready." Ready was 5 minutes ago. The back door strips moved. The music skipped and caught itself. The youngest of the 3 men stood up, careful about it, easing his chair back so the legs stayed quiet. His brothers stayed seated. He wanted to play this one solo. "Ma'am," he said, taking a step too close. Kendra let him. He wanted her to flinch, and she held perfectly still. "You smell like church." "I'm not a church," she said. His hand came up, not a fist, a slow reach, like he was going to touch her cheek. The air between his fingers and her skin was colder than the rest of the room. "You're sweating silver," he said, his voice gone thick. "Been a while since anyone brought us something this nice." Kendra's hand was on the coffee mug, not the gun. He expected the gun. He expected the steel flash and the bang and the holes he could survive long enough to grin about. The mug was old and its handle was cracked, and it broke exactly the way she needed it to. She swung the ceramic lip across his mouth and the rim shattered against his teeth, peeling his upper lip back in a flap that showed a gum line too pale, too wide, and not even close to human. The sound he made was something that ate itself on the way out, a noise that folded inward. He staggered back with his hands on his face, and Kendra drove the jagged edge of the broken handle into his left eye and let go. For 1 second, the entire room forgot how to move. Then the bartender cleared his throat, and the dark-haired woman grinned. "Well, now we're talking." The 2 seated men stood at the same time, not the way regular people stand up. They moved together, synchronized, like they drilled it. They never looked at each other to coordinate. They already knew. "You'll need to pay for that mug." The bartender vaulted over the bar with a grace that would have been funny if his knees hadn't bent too far when he landed. She heard something wet pop in both of them, and he kept right on moving. The young one yanked the handle out of his eye. It came out trailing something dark and thick that wasn't blood, or at least not blood that followed normal rules. The socket was already closing, the flesh knitting around the wound with a wet, deliberate patience. He grinned at her with the lip flap hanging, fangs sliding out with a click. "I don't like coffee." He grinned around the hanging lip. The woman swung off her bar stool and her hair fell like a curtain, and underneath it her throat was a ladder of scars, filed into the skin in rows, healed and rehealed in stair-step ridges. She smiled and half the scabs cracked open. The smell that came off her was copper and sugar and old meat. "Take her to the back." The bartender cracked his neck. "We'll play in the cool." There weren't a lot of good options in a room built like this one. The red bar was designed as a funnel. The tables and stools and decorative barrels were placed so that if you moved too fast in any direction, you'd trip into the angle they wanted. The door was heavy. The windows were paint. The exits were made of things that wanted to eat her. So Kendra did the one thing a place like this wasn't built for. She screamed. Not words, not a name, just everything she had in the bottom of her lungs dragged up through the place where the fear lived, and she let it rip. The sound hit the brass bell wired above the door and rattled it hard enough that one of the wires snapped. The bell broke free and rang, bright and high and honest. Everything in the room that lived on silence flinched. Luna heard it. The door left a dent in the drywall on its way open. 60 pounds of scarred muscle with pale blue eyes hit the red light and the space between Kendra and the woman in the same heartbeat. Luna went straight for the calf, teeth sinking in, shaking the way a terrier kills a rat. The sound the woman made was something between a hiss and a shriek that collapsed before it finished. The stuff that came out of the wound strung between Luna's teeth like pulled sugar. "Good girl," Kendra said, which was the last normal thing anybody said in that room for a while. The bartender lunged for Luna. Kendra put a round from the pistol through his left shoulder to change his angle. He went over the nearest table like water, his joints working in ways that no skeleton she'd ever studied could explain, and his hand came down on the machete blade. The silver sizzled where it touched his skin. Smoke curled. He held on anyway. His gums peeled back and he smiled around his own burning flesh. "She'll taste sweet." Kendra brought the butt of the pistol down on his temple. The skin split too easy. There should have been bone underneath. There wasn't. Something shivered in there instead, a plate of something that dented like a drum. She filed that under things to worry about later and kept moving. The two men from the corner came at her together, one high and one low. She fed the first one a stake up under the ribs and felt it catch cartilage, then lodge, then give with a soft click. He made a sound like air leaking from a tire. The second one went for her knees. She caught his chin with her boot and felt a tooth snap, and he liked it. Actually grinned around the broken piece like it was a party favor. Behind them, the plastic strips at the back of the room parted. Something stepped through, and the temperature dropped about 10 degrees. It was tall, not basketball player tall, wrong tall. The proportions were off. Too narrow at the hips, too wide at the shoulders, and long in a way that only made sense if somebody had replaced its spine with a rope. Its arms hung past its knees, fingers tapered into points that weren't quite claws and weren't quite blades. The skin was pulled tight over cables of muscle that showed through like an anatomy diagram, layers visible where they shouldn't be. Its eyes struggled with the light, pupils expanding and contracting, and they locked on her breath instead of her face. It watched the cloud her mouth made in the cold air and angled toward it. Chains trailed from its wrists, scraping the concrete. Its own mouth was a long slit running across the lower half of its face, lipless, sealed shut. But below that, offset from where any mouth should be, there was a second one, smaller, human. A boy's mouth. The lips moved without sound, shaping a word that could have been mom or mine or help. "Jesus," Kendra said before she could stop herself. The thing turned its head. Something in those eyes flickered. Recognition, or the ghost of it, or maybe just the memory of a boy who used to recognize things before whatever happened to him happened. The bartender laughed from the floor, blood running from his temple. "Come see the back room. That's where the real work happens." Kendra looked at the drain in the center of the floor, 8 inches across, maybe 9, with a steel grid over it, but the concrete around it was newer than the rest. The slope was intentional. The floor wasn't a floor. It was designed to move liquid in one direction. Down. Chapter 4. The Feeding Room. Kendra kicked the grid loose. The screws on one side had been deliberately stripped so the whole thing could be lifted and set aside without tools. Somebody used this hole regularly. The smell that came up was cold and copper and sweet in a way that made her jaw clench. She caught the top rung of a ladder, bolted to the wall, and went down before the bartender could get back on his feet. The drop was about 16 feet, the ladder cold enough to sting her palms. Luna's claws scrabbled on the rungs behind her, clicking on the metal with the confidence of a dog that had been down worse holes than this one. Her boots hit coated concrete, industrial floor, the kind you could hose down. She clicked on the pen torch clamped between her teeth and swept the beam across the room. It was about 40 feet long and maybe 15 wide, set up like a walk-in cooler that somebody had converted into something much worse. Rails ran the length of the ceiling with hooks hanging at regular intervals. Some of the hooks were empty. Some of them held what looked like sides of meat wrapped in frost-slick translucent bags. A couple of the bags had hands inside them, fingers curled, and Kendra's stomach lurched and she swallowed it back down because this wasn't the time. On the right side, drums with cam locks and clean spigots, lined up neat, each one labeled with a code and a date, a hose looped on a wall hook, a compressor unit chugging behind a metal cage, frost feathering the grating. On the left, a row of cots with restraint straps, 5 of them. 3 were empty and brown with old blood. 2 held bodies under thin sheets, chests rising and falling. And at the far end, a red lever on the wall labeled emergency drain in stenciled white letters, with a smaller one beside it labeled cycle. This was no nest. A nest was an animal thing, messy and instinctive. This was a business. Somebody had put drainage specs and batch codes and labeled levers into a room designed to bleed people efficiently. The feeding room had been built by someone who kept spreadsheets. Kendra found Damien on the second cot from the wall. She recognized him from what Daphne had described. Skinny, acne scars across both cheekbones like a scatter of small dents. His lips were moving, but there was no sound, just the tiny repetitive motion of somebody dreaming. Tubing ran from the crook of his arm to a bag, and the bag drip-fed into one of the drums through a gravity line. No vacuum, no pump, just a slow drain, patient and efficient. "Hey," she said, pulling the tape off his arm and pinching the IV line shut. "You're coming off this." He sighed when the tubing came free. Just a small sound, barely there, but it punched a hole in Kendra's chest anyway. The woman on the next cot was in worse shape, glaze-eyed, cracked lips, a smear of lipstick still hanging on like it was the last normal thing she'd tried to believe in. A tube in the crook of her elbow fed into a second drum. Kendra cut the strap on her left wrist and started on the right. Above her, boots hit the ladder. The dark-haired woman came down first, dropping the rungs like she'd done it 1,000 times. One of the suited men followed. Then the bartender, lowering himself with his wrong knees, making sounds that knees shouldn't make. "Don't wake them up." The dark-haired woman leaned closer. She was close enough that Kendra could feel the cold coming off her skin. "They cry when they wake up." "Good." Her voice was flat. "Crying means they're alive." She cut the second strap. The woman on the cot blinked, her eyes trying to focus, and Kendra caught her before she could roll off. "I got you," she said, low and steady. "I'm going to get you out of here. When your feet hit the floor, keep them under you. If you faint, I'll carry you. Just breathe." The woman's eyes found hers. There was a person still in there, buried under whatever they'd done to her, and that person grabbed onto Kendra's voice like a rope. The suited man moved to flank. The dark-haired woman circled to the other side, cutting off the path to the ladder. The bartender positioned himself between the drums, grinning with his split temple and his 2 smooth gums. They weren't rushing her, they were netting her, closing the angles the way fishermen close a net, patient and practiced. Kendra's hand was on the machete grip when the tall shape dropped from the ladder opening. It bypassed the rungs entirely, folded itself through the hole and unfolded at the bottom, chains scraping, and straightened to its full height. The boy's mouth moved. The long slit above it stayed sealed. The temperature in the room dropped again. The compressor kicked harder. Frost crawled along the nearest rail. "Chain her up." The dark-haired woman circled wider. "We'll talk when she stops shaking." They came at her from three sides. Kendra went left, toward the cots, and away from the drums, using the hanging bags as cover. The suited man grabbed for her wrist and she ducked under his arm and dragged the machete edge across his belt line, not deep, just enough to make him believe in a future he didn't want. He flinched and tried again, and the joint in his hand folded the wrong way. He laughed about it. They always laughed about the wrong things. The dark-haired woman came from behind, nails aimed at the tendon in Kendra's neck. Luna slammed into her shin with the full-body commitment of a dog who had learned the price of letting things get close and had decided the price was too high. The woman went sideways. Luna shook what she'd grabbed and held on. The bartender swung a chain. He used it like a dock worker, heavy and looping. Kendra caught it on the machete's spine, and the silver sizzled where the links touched the blade. Smoke flared. The stink of burned metal filled the cold air. He grinned wider. "You like that? We got more chain down here." "Not really my thing." She swept his ankles. His legs had too much give in them, that wrong bend, and he went down slow, like the part of him that knew how to fall was waiting for different instructions. The tall thing reached for Luna. "Don't," Kendra said. And she didn't mean don't hurt her. She meant don't learn that you can take the thing I love and use it against me. The boy's lips moved again. No sound, just the shape of something small and desperate. They got her anyway. They got her because there were four of them plus the tall and one of her plus Luna, and the room was built for this. The chain came low, a hook came high. The young one from upstairs dropped through the hole and body-checked her into the nearest rail. Luna tried to take his exposed thigh and a boot caught her in the ribs and she yelped. That sound, that one specific sound that Luna almost never made, emptied Kendra of everything except rage, and the rage made her swing wild, and swinging wild was exactly what they'd been waiting for. The chain looped her wrist. The machete clattered to the floor under the rails. A hand she couldn't map, too many joints, folded her elbow the wrong direction just long enough to make her fingers forget what they were doing. The dark-haired woman slipped a loop over her shoulders and pulled. They hung her from a hook meant for meat, under the arms, pushing into the muscle of her back, just enough that her weight hurt but didn't tear. Her toes left the floor by about an inch. Luna leaped and caught the back of her pant leg, paws scrabbling at her calf like she could pull the whole apparatus down by love alone. "Down," Kendra gasped, because she couldn't afford Luna being up here when whatever came next started. Luna dropped instantly, teeth bared, braced and ready. Good girl, best girl in the world. The dark-haired woman reached up and stroked the strap that held Kendra's arms. She ran 2 fingers along it, almost tender, then used a nail to part the skin between those fingers. The blood that beaded was bright and clean. She watched it with a kind of clinical attention, then put the fingers in her mouth. Her eyes went flat and satisfied. She's going to be fun. "Don't start yet," the bartender said. He'd found his feet again and was wiping the blood off his temple with a rag that would never be clean. "He'll be here in 10. "Who?" Kendra asked, because questions were always better than silence. "The architect." He said it with the pride of a man who'd been waiting to name-drop his boss. "He builds rooms like this one, all the way to the water." Chapter 5. The Architect. The ladder creaked. A foot in a polished boot appeared, then another. The man who came down the rungs looked perfectly normal. That was the point. Clean face, handsome in a way that came out of a casting agency, a jaw that worked in photographs and eyes that smiled first and took second. Dark suit, dark tie, a pocket square that was the color of old blood but probably cost more than Kendra's truck. He carried a leather case in one hand that fell somewhere between a doctor's bag and a briefcase. He stepped off the last rung and looked at the room first, not Kendra. looked at it the way a man looks at a house he's renovating, checking the details, making sure nothing was out of place. Evening. His voice was warm in a way you trusted before you realized you were trusting it. "Sir," the bartender straightened up, a little breathless. The architect set the case on the table and snapped it open. Inside were neat rows of metal tools that Kendra was better off not thinking about. He touched each one with the care you save for things you built yourself. Behind him, the tall shifted, chains whispering, and the architect's hand came up and smoothed the air near it. "Good progress," he murmured. "Still too much connective tissue in the joints. We'll address that." Kendra's stomach flipped. She made it stop. He finally looked at her, and his face lit up with professional interest. Not hunger, not cruelty, the way a collector looks at a piece he's been hearing about. "The woman who listens," he said. "I've been hoping we'd meet. Can't say the feeling's mutual." He smiled. "You've made quite a mess of my bar. We'll have to repaint the sign again. Could use a new name while you're at it. Bar is a little on the nose." "I appreciate directness," he said, and sounded like he meant it. "You're running a trail from Abilene, yes? The drainage ditch was inelegant. That crew has been reprimanded." "Reprimanded," Kendra repeated. "You reprimand the guys who leave bodies in ditches." "Standards matter." He pulled a stool over and sat down, crossing one leg over the other like they were having drinks at a hotel bar. "Do you know what this room is?" "A slaughterhouse with good plumbing." "It's a node," he said, like she'd given the wrong answer on a quiz. "One of 11 between here and Lake Charles. Bars, church basements, detention centers, empty storage units. Places that were already used to being quiet." He gestured at the drums, the rails, the cots. "We don't make messes, Kendra. We make infrastructure." Hearing her name in his mouth was worse than the hook. It made the room smaller. "You know my name. I've known your name since Oklahoma." He glanced at the tall thing in the corner. The boy's lips twitched. The architect nodded once, as if checking some internal metric. "Children who can see us are worth tracking. We didn't interfere. You did what people do. Held your own head under water for as long as you could stand it. Quite frankly, I'm impressed you stopped." "The drinking?" "The hiding." He uncrossed his legs and leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You see things, Kendra. You always have. And now you're sober and trained and very angry, and you've decided to use all of that to hunt creatures like me. I find that fascinating. I find you fascinating too." She shifted her weight on the hook, in a burn-it-down kind of way. He smiled again. It was a smile you'd want to trust in a dark room, and that was exactly what made it dangerous. "2 offers," he said. "First, you walk out. We keep the dog. Everyone gets to keep their tongue. Second, you come work with me. I could use someone who hears the dead. The logistics alone would be transformative. Counter offer. I get off this hook, I take my dog, and then I burn every room you've ever built." Ambitious. "But you're hanging from a meat hook in a basement, so maybe save the mission statement for later." He reached for a tool in the case, a silver rod with a forked end that hummed when he thumbed a switch. He held it up so she could see it. "This part is quiet." He held the rod steady. "I promise." "I've heard your promises." She looked at the ceiling. "They come with hooks." He stepped closer. The rod hummed near her face. She could feel it in her teeth, a vibration that wanted to turn her fillings into antennas. That was when Luna decided she'd been patient long enough. Chapter 6. The Burn. Luna had spent the last 3 minutes doing something Kendra hadn't noticed because she'd been too busy hanging from a meat hook making conversation with a vampire in a nice suit. What Luna had been doing was testing the chain attached to the tall thing's wrist, nosing it, mouthing it, finding the snap hook at the free end where it connected to a ring bolted into the floor, and working out the angle. 60 pounds of dog threw herself backward against the chain with everything she had. The snap hook screeched across the floor ring and slipped free. The chain whipped loose, the free end lashing the architect across the calf. He stepped back, not out of fear, out of geometry. He preferred to stay inside the diagram he'd drawn. Cute. He reached to secure the chain again. Kendra kicked. Not wild, not stupid. A precise kick, the one you make when you've been hanging long enough to know exactly where your feet are in space. The toe of her boot caught the red emergency drain lever and shoved it an inch. Just an inch. But an inch was all an alarm needed to do what alarms were built to do. A klaxon hidden in the ceiling barked twice and then settled into a long metallic wail that turned everybody in the room to stone for one full heartbeat. Up above, the brass bell that Kendra had freed from its wire answered, faint and bright and real. The architect looked up. His face without the smile was not a pleasant thing. Turn that off. The bartender threw the lever back. The alarm died, but the sound had already traveled, and sound was a hard thing to put back in a box once you let it out. Somewhere above them, a car door slammed, boots on gravel. A young voice that hadn't owned a badge long enough to trust it barked something Kendra couldn't quite make out. The architect's gaze came back to her. "You think people will save you?" "I think people buy me time." Kendra twisted in the strap. "And I'm good at spending it." She twisted in the straps. Her right hand had been working the corroded rivet where the leather met the hook since they'd hung her up, and the metal had been flaking for the last 2 minutes. She hooked her thumb under the strap, dug into the rust, and the rivet gave. The strap slipped 1 notch, then 2. Her right hand came free. She skipped the machete on the floor. She grabbed the nearest hanging chain and swung her weight into it, using the momentum to wrench the hook out of the bracket above her. The bracket wasn't designed for a person who fought back. It was designed for meat that hung still. It shrieked and bent, and Kendra hit the floor on her knees with the strap still tangled around her left arm and her shoulder screaming from the hook wounds in her back. The room moved at once. The suited man lunged. Kendra rolled under the rail, grabbed the machete, and came up swinging. Silver Edge caught him across the chest and he stumbled back into a hanging bag that swung on its hook and knocked him sideways. The dark-haired woman dove for Luna. Luna met her in the air, all teeth and commitment, and they hit the epoxy in a tangle of fur and nails and hissing. The bartender went for the chain again. Kendra kicked the pallet jack that sat against the wall and it rolled into his path. He tried to vault it and his wrong knees gave out on him. The chain in his hand caught in the jack's wheel, and the wheel ate it. Metal wound around the axle with a grinding sound and jammed tight. The bartender yanked. The jack held firm. He was leashed to the room now. "Son of a," he started. "Yeah, mechanical advantage. It's a whole thing." The young one dropped from the ladder opening, eye still healing, lip still hanging, and came at her fast. He was pretty, and he fought like it, which meant he fought for show. Kendra put a stake through the meat of his shoulder and he shrieked, and the shriek folded in on itself the way their sounds always did. She kicked him into the drum line and 3 of the drums toppled, spilling their contents across the floor in a slow, dark river. The smell was immediate, copper and sweetness and something under it that went deeper than rust. It was the smell of a lot of people's blood collected in one place, and it made every vampire in the room snap their attention toward it for a fraction of a second. That fraction was all Kendra needed. She grabbed one of the toppled drums and rolled it toward the compressor in the corner. The liquid inside sloshed and leaked through the loosened spigot, trailing a dark line across the epoxy. She kicked a second drum over and aimed it at the cots, creating a channel. Then she pulled the last UV flare from her jacket and cracked it against the floor. White light erupted. Every vampire in the room flinched. The dark-haired woman screamed. The suited men stumbled backward, hands up, pupils contracting to pinpoints. "You want to burn this place?" Kendra said to the architect. "Let's burn it together." She touched the flare to the spilled liquid near the compressor. It caught slow, smoldering first, then building into a greasy flame that crawled instead of jumped, but it was enough. The heat hit the compressor's frost and steam erupted, thick and white, filling the room from the floor up. The vampires hated it. Steam was a cousin of light. It got into every gap, and it blinded things that relied on the dark. "Get the door!" a voice shouted from above. The sheriff's voice, older, harder. Air moved through the room as someone opened something upstairs. The architect watched the fire with an expression that was closer to annoyance than fear. He closed his leather case with a precise click and tucked it under his arm. "We'll relocate." He turned to the bartender. "Burn the whole building." "Now?" the bartender asked from behind the pallet jack, still chained to it. "Now." He turned to Kendra. The smile was back, but different now. Thinner. "We'll continue this into Quincy. I'll save you a hook with your name on it. Make sure you fucking spell it right." He climbed the ladder with the calm of a man leaving a restaurant where the service was disappointing. The dark-haired woman followed, moving fast, favoring the leg Luna had chewed. One of the suited men went after her. The other stayed, too disoriented from the steam and the UV to find the ladder. He stumbled into a hanging bag and went down. The young one was pulling the steak from his shoulder with his teeth. He spat it out and grinned at Kendra with blood on his chin. "See you down the road." He followed his boss up the ladder. The tall thing stood in the corner. It hadn't moved during any of it. The chain hung slack from its wrist, the end Luna had freed dragging on the floor. The boy's lips were moving faster now, frantic, shaping the same word over and over. "Mom! Mom! Mom!" Kendra walked to it. The heat from the fire was building behind her. Steam swirled between them. "I can't get you out right now," she said. "That chain goes to something I don't know how to break yet." The boy's lips went still. The slit above them stayed sealed. The eyes, those wrong, oversized pupils, found her, really looked. And somewhere in there, underneath whatever they'd built on top of him, somebody's son heard her. "Next time," her voice cracked. "I promise." The tall thing bowed its head. The chain clinked once, soft. Kendra turned away from it because if she didn't do it now, she was going to try to break that chain with her bare hands and die in a burning basement for a boy she couldn't save yet. "Luna, door." Luna let go of whatever she'd been biting and ran for the ladder. Kendra grabbed the strapped woman from the cot, hauled her upright, and pushed her toward the rungs. "Climb," she told her. "Doesn't matter how, just get up." The woman grabbed the ladder with hands that shook so hard the metal rang. She climbed, slowly, badly, but she climbed. Kendra checked Damien on the cot, still breathing, still unconscious. She couldn't carry him and the woman at the same time, and the fire was spreading along the drumline she'd created. She found the restraint buckles and unsnapped them so he wasn't strapped down anymore. If he woke up, he could move. She grabbed a crate from the stack against the far wall. It was labeled Daquincy in block letters. She ripped the lid with the machete spine. Inside, sealed pouches of dark red, each one labeled with a code and a batch time. A clipboard sat on top with a route sheet. She took the clipboard and one of the pouches and stuffed them inside her jacket. The bartender was still chained to the pallet jack. He'd stopped pulling and was just standing there, watching the fire crawl toward him. His face had gone flat. Whatever performance he'd been running all night was over. Kendra walked over and cut the chain where it met the jack's wheel. The links parted with a hiss of silver and the bartender stumbled free. "Go," she said. He looked at her like the word was in a language he'd forgotten. "I said go. Take whoever's left and get out before the ceiling comes down." He stared at her for another second. Then he ran for the ladder without looking back. Kendra went up last. Her back was bleeding from the hook wounds. Her arm burned where the dark-haired woman had clawed her. Her ribs ached from the young one's tackle. The sigil scar on her palm throbbed with every rung. But she climbed, and Luna was waiting for her at the top, tail wagging, eyes bright, because dogs didn't care how broken you were as long as you kept showing up. The bar was full of smoke. The red-tinted sheets over the lights had melted and the fluorescence buzzed naked and harsh. The sheriff stood in the doorway with his hat pushed back and his hand on his holster and a look on his face that said he'd seen basements before, but never one like this. A young deputy had the strapped woman wrapped in a blanket by a cruiser. She was shaking. She was alive. That counted. The sheriff looked at Kendra, then at Luna with the knife wound in her shoulder and the blood matting her fur, and then at the smoke pouring up through the hole in the floor. What in the name of God? Kitchen fire. Kendra wiped the blood from her lip. You're going to want to call EMS. There are more people down there. He stared at her. Don't go down yourself, she said. Just get them out and get clear. He looked at Luna again. Is your dog okay? She will be. She loved him a little for asking. He nodded once. A decision nod, not a thinking nod. He didn't plan on explaining it. Get out of here, he said, before my boys decide they want to be heroes. Already gone. She was halfway to the truck when 2 EMTs came through the bar's front door carrying a stretcher between them. Skinny kid, acne scars, breathing. His eyes were closed, but his chest moved, and that was enough. The second stretcher came out a minute later with a woman from the cot, wrapped in a shock blanket, blinking at the sky. Kendra pulled her phone and dialed the diner. It rang 6 times. Cash only, no exceptions, Daphne answered, sounding like a woman who hadn't slept. Damien's alive, Kendra said. Lockhart EMS has him. Tell his mama. Silence on the line, then a sound that wasn't quite a word and wasn't quite a sob. Thank you, Daphne whispered. Kendra hung up. That was the job. It didn't pay, it didn't come with dental, but sometimes it came with this. Chapter 7. The Road East. The gravel lot was empty except for the cruisers and the smoke and the neon sign that still blinked bar like nothing had happened. Kendra boosted Luna into the Durango's passenger seat, and the dog whimpered once, low, then settled with her head on the console. I know. We'll fix it. She pulled the first aid kit from behind the seat and worked fast under the dome light, flushed the knife wound on Luna's shoulder with saline, packed it with gauze and taped it down. Luna watched her work without flinching, eyes calm, head turned away with the dignity of a dog who trusted the process even if she didn't enjoy it. When Kendra tied the last piece of tape, Luna breathed out and leaned her weight into Kendra's arm. Good girl, Kendra said. She meant I love you and thank you and please don't die on me, but good girl covered all of it. She dug the clipboard out of her jacket and opened it on the dash. The route sheet was handwritten in a clean, precise hand. Route. Palestine to Lufkin to Daquincy to Lake Charles if clearance. Transfer contact. A Carter alias architect. Note. New sleepers to be installed. See drawings. She didn't look at the drawings. Not tonight. The blood pouch went into the glove box next to a tin of dog treats and a photo of her father she kept meaning to throw away and never did. She'd find someone with a microscope and the right questions eventually. For now, it was evidence. Proof that what happened in Lockhart wasn't a one-off. She started the engine, pulled onto Highway 45. The red bar shrank in the rearview mirror until it was just a smudge of red neon and smoke, and then it was nothing. Luna shifted, put her head on Kendra's thigh, and closed her eyes. The dead went quiet, not gone, just satisfied that she was moving in the right direction, east, toward Louisiana, where the piney woods turned to bayou and the air got thick enough to chew, toward DeQuincy, where the architect was already setting up the next room. The route sheet said 11 nodes between here and the coast. Kendra had just burned the first one, 10 to go. DeQuincy, she said to Luna. We sleep 4 hours. I stitch us both up properly, and then we go burn a chain. Luna's tail thumped once against the seat. The sun came up somewhere over the pines and turned the road orange. Kendra rolled the window down and let the air in. It smelled like wet pine and river water and the first clean breath she'd taken since the motel room. She turned the radio on. It found a country station playing something she didn't know. She let it play. 10 more rooms, 1 architect. A boy on a chain who mouthed the word mom and couldn't say it out loud. A route that stretched to the Gulf Coast and maybe further. And somewhere behind all of it, the reason these things had known her name since Oklahoma. She was going to find out why. She was going to burn every room between here and the answer, and when she found the architect again, she was going to finish what the red bar started. But first, 4 hours of sleep, or 2, or whatever Luna would let her get away with. The road hummed, the dog slept, the hunter drove east. Folklore note: East Texas between Dallas and the Louisiana border is piney woods and red clay and small towns that the highways forgot about. The Highway 45 corridor runs through Anderson County, which has one of the highest rates of unexplained livestock deaths in the state according to agricultural reports from the 1990s and early 2000s. Ranchers in the area have reported cattle found drained of blood with no visible predator marks going back decades. The official explanations have always been coyotes, feral dogs, or natural causes. Lockhart is a real town, population just over 1,000, depending on who's counting and whether they count the ones who stopped answering their phones. The red bar is fiction. The kind of bar it represents is not. East Texas has a long history of roadside establishments that appear and disappear between census years, owned by people who don't file paperwork and don't keep records. Some of them are just bad businesses. Some of them are something else. The slaughterhouse infrastructure described in this story is based on real cold chain logistics used in the meat processing industry. Walk-in coolers, rail and hook systems, gravity-fed drainage, batch processing. The equipment exists, the rooms exist. What fills them is where the fiction starts, supposedly. The route from Palestine to Lake Charles follows real roads through real towns. Drive it sometime if you don't believe me. Bring a full tank. Don't stop at bars you don't recognize. And if the sign only says bar, keep driving. Well, 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 boys and ghouls. That wraps up another terrorific tale from the vault. Poor Kendra Lockhart, 5 years sober, armed to the teeth. Had a machete, a shotgun, a bag full of silver, and a plan that lasted about 30 seconds before she was hanging from a meat hook in a basement. Her big opening move? She broke a coffee mug across a vampire's face. A fucking coffee mug. That's not a weapon, that's a Tuesday morning at Waffle House. But it worked. Mostly. She's alive. The dog's alive. The bar is on fire. I'd call that a passing grade, wouldn't you? And that thing with the chains? The tall one with the boy's mouth stuck in the wrong part of its face? Somebody's son is in there, kiddies. Somebody's kid went missing and ended up fused into something that eats on a leash. The architect didn't leave it behind either. That thing is on the road now, heading east in the back of something with tinted windows, that little mouth still shaping the same word he'll never get to finish. Oh, how tragic. How unfortunate. Just how we fucking love it. Hit that subscribe button. New creature features drop every day at 8 p.m. Central. And trust me, tomorrow's even nastier. Leave a like if you've ever driven past a bar on a back road that felt wrong. Painted over windows. Too many trucks in the lot. A sign that only half works. You kept driving, didn't you? Smart. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from? What's the sketchiest roadside bar you've ever seen that you wouldn't walk into for $1 million? I'm always hunting for the next nightmare. Until next time, kiddies, keep your fires burning and your eyes on the trees. This has been your late night creature feature. I'm Mr. Wendigo. And hey, look on the bright side. At least the architect keeps a clean workspace. Hooks in a row, drums labeled, batch codes and everything. You ever seen a vampire with a filing system? Gotta respect the organization. Mad respect. Sweet dreams, kiddies. Sweet dreams.